What up, 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 what up? What's up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to episode 71 of the Spun Today Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz. Thank you in advance for listening. This episode, as always, is brought to you in part by the fine folks over at Amazon. If you want to help support the podcast, visit my Amazon affiliate link page at spuntoday.com/affiliate links. Click on the Amazon banner and do your shopping as you normally do. It does not cost you anything extra, and it's a way to help support the show financially. In this episode, I speak about going to the theater to watch Boss Baby and seeing a movie that I had never heard of that came out in 2016 starring Eddie Murphy, Mr. Church. I also speak about UFC Fight Night Johnson vs. Reis. And lastly, I read and reflect on some of my free writing, which is located, you know where, at spuntoday.com/free writing. If you're into any of that good stuff, stick around. So first off, rest in peace to Charlie Murphy. As most of you may know by now, that is Charlie. That is Eddie Murphy's brother. That older brother, if I'm not mistaken, that recently passed away at the age of, I believe, 51 or 57 after a battle with leukemia. He was also a headlining touring comic, and just sad circumstances. My wife actually just told me that his wife passed away in 2009 from ovarian cancer, which must be fucking rough on the family, dealing with losing both your parents, virtually the same way through cancer. So fuck cancer. And it was actually because of that I stumbled upon this movie, Mr. Church, which, as I just told you guys, I had never heard of before. And I was watching an interview with Eddie Murphy, like a clip of an interview where he was speaking about his brother and stuff like that, and how his brother Charlie was one of the first impressions that he ever did growing up. When he was like a little kid, he just used to like mock and mimic his brother, and to this day it's one of the like voices or whatever that he does, and he does it like pretty spot on if you've ever heard it. And this interview happened to be an interview that he was doing to plug this movie called Mr. Church, which I had never heard of. And I looked it up, and it seemed like an interesting enough story. And I watched it with my wife, and I was glad I did. It was a pretty dope movie. The writing was great. It was like a very like poetic writing, romantic writing, and I'm take that with a grain of salt, because I'm an easy sell with any movie that is narrated or any story that's narrated throughout, which this one was. I enjoy movies like that for whatever reason. Just the story of it was, spoiler alert, if anybody hasn't seen it, I'm going to speak a bit about the movie as I do in all like these like movie type reviews or whatever. The story was pretty much a man by the name of Mr. Church, played by Eddie Murphy. And by the way, it's like a serious type movie. It's not like a comedy. This guy named Mr. Church is paid off by a gentleman that apparently had a lot of money. They never got into what that gentleman did, I don't think. Or if they did, I didn't catch on to it. I got the impression that it was some sort of like mafioso type shit. But maybe that's just my mental bend or whatever. In terms of like making that connection. But the story goes that a single mother used to date this, let's call him mafioso character, and he died, but he paid off Mr. Church to look after the single mother, because the single mother had cancer and she was dying. She had 6 months to live, and the ex-boyfriend of the single mother, which passed away, paid off Mr. Church to like look after and cook and stuff like that. She had a young girl, daughter that was, I want to say like 10 years old at the time. when Mr. Church like entered their lives, and he did. He looked after them, and that 6-month period turned into, I believe, 6 years or 10 years or something like that. And the mother, survived that long, and then she wound up passing away. In that time period, they bonded. They became family, and it was a rough start at first. But then through his cooking, because he was like just like master chef dude, that was very private but very accommodating to the woman and the young girl, and looked after them. Then the young girl moves away to college after the mother passes away, and she still keeps in touch with Mr. Church. And the movie's mainly about like a friendship between like them two, and it's kind of like a paternalistic type of relationship, and they will look out for one another. But like I said, Mr. Church was a very private man. He was, in this story, that he's into jazz, because he's always playing jazz in the background when while he's cooking. He's like some like master Iron Chef type dude, and that's actually how he wins the little girl over, who didn't want him in their lives to be in the beginning. She just wanted it to be her and mommy, and through his cooking, which was phenomenal, he won the little girl over. Obviously the mother appreciated the help, and besides jazz and cooking, he was also into reading. Like, he had tons and tons of books, and he used to share the books with the mother, and he brought a boatload of books to the house and told the little girl to give her some recommendations to start reading. And she didn't like reading, and then she got into reading because of him. And you also see him like doodling in a little like notebook, like taking notes or something while he's cooking. And besides that, you don't know much about him. He's kind of, you don't know if he has a family of his own or anything like that. At the end of like each night, after he cleans up, he cooks breakfast and lunch and dinner, looks after, does all the grocery shopping and stuff like that, and then cleans up at the end of the night and then leaves. And then the next morning comes back, does the same thing over and over again for 6 years. And the little girl's always wondering like where does he go and stuff like that. And then one day when she's older, I believe it was when she was coming back from college. I don't remember if she dropped out or if she finished. I think she dropped out, or took some time off. She took some time off, actually, if I'm not mistaken, because she got knocked up. She comes back around the way and visits Mr. Church, and she actually, like, driving around, she sees Mr. Church in front of a nightclub, like a jazz club, and he's just like hanging out with a few people, and then he goes into it. And that nightclub supposedly had a bad rep, and she knew he was into jazz, but she didn't know exactly what he was doing there, because he was like a stand-up kind of guy, and it's like a nightclub that has like a bad rep, and he's just chilling there. And she's curious about that. And long story short, her being pregnant, not being with the guy that knocked her up, Mr. Church is like back in their lives, and then she kind of like assumes the role of the mother of her mother that passed away. And her daughter assumes like her role, and Mr. Church continues in his role of supporting them, and he allows her to move in with him, and it's like a very similar like deja vu-ish type of relationship. In moving in with Mr. Church, this is where she finds out like a little bit more about him, in terms of he must have had a troubled past, because he comes home drunk from this nightclub that he sneaks off to like a couple nights a week. And you hear he's like arguing with himself, like talking to himself type of thing, like a belligerent drunk kind of way. And he's like arguing with his father. What did he, I believe, that's what I got from it. And, he's saying things like, oh, you're not, I'm bigger than you now. You can't keep hitting me and mama and blah, 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 like stuff like that. And, then she realizes that, that part of him. So she like writes it off that he used to go to the nightclub and just get drunk and listen to jazz and stuff like that, because he was into jazz. Anyway, long story short, my favorite part about the movie, and I don't want to give, more than I already did away, is that he, by the end of the movie, we realized that, like, he drew, like, in that notebook that he was scribbling in, he was, like, doing drawings. Like, when the little girl was with her friend from school, and they were having lunch in the kitchen, and he cooked, made them a grilled cheese sandwich or whatever, and he, like, drew them. And, he drew pictures of the mother, and he just drew, like, awesome, like, an artist type shit. And he was obviously a phenomenal cook, which everybody thought that was his thing, and he was, like, the man at. And then when the girl visited from college and stayed in his house, she snuck into his room once, and she saw a painting on the wall, like or I guess, like, watercolor paintings or whatever, like a canvas type painting, and he painted a portrait of her mother that had passed. So he was, like, an awesome painter also. And then eventually Mr. Church passes away, spoiler alert, and I believe it was cancer as well, like something with his lungs. I think it was cancer. The girl is there obviously at the funeral, and as well as the little girl's daughter, which was very attached to Mr. Church by this time, and helping raise her, and other people that were in Mr. Church's life, but that the girl didn't necessarily know. And then a gentleman comes in, and he introduces himself to the girl. The girl says, "Oh, hi, I'm so and so," and he was like, "Oh, I've heard a lot about you from Mr. Church." And she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, who are you?" And then he explains that he's the owner of that nightclub that has, like, that bad rep. And he was like, "Oh, wow, it's so great to meet, somebody that was close with Mr. Church also, et cetera, et cetera." And, just some small talk. And then she's like, "Oh, here's a plate of food or whatever, try this peach cobbler." It was actually Mr. Church's recipe. And he takes a bite, and he's like, "My God, it's, like, phenomenal. This is the best peach cobbler I've ever tasted." And he's like, "I didn't even know he could cook." And then the girl's, like, kind of, like, taken aback, because that's, like, the only thing she knew him for, And then like, she asked more about him, like, what, did he just frequent the club a lot, or what was the deal? And he was like, "Oh no, he used to go and he used to play the piano. He used to play jazz." And she was like, "Oh, so he worked there. He worked nights there or something like that." And he was like, "Oh no, it wasn't even anything like that." One day, I was there in the club, and sometimes the folks that are there go and they tinker, with the piano, whatever, between band sessions and stuff like that. And somebody went on the piano, and I swear that I thought that one of the greats had just, like, entered, stopped by for a drink, and they were gonna, just wow the crowd a little bit, because it was, like, the most beautiful jazz playing pianist that I had heard. And it was literally like like we were being blessed in that moment or something like that. And that was him speaking about how he knew Mr. Church. So he was like, this, aside from being a painter and a drawer and this fucking phenomenally well-read dude that had fucking hundreds of books and an amazing cook, he was this crazy sick jazz pianist also, which was dope. And what I liked about it, what I don't know, like, stayed with me, was that he had, like, these compartmentalized, like, pieces of his own life, and everybody knew him to be not necessarily great, or although they did know him to be great at these things as certain individual things, but they just knew him for certain specific things. And it's like you shared parts of himself with certain people, but not all. Like, he was kind of, like, sheltered and shielded himself from it, from I don't know, exposing too much, I guess. And that was just like super interesting to me. It was pretty cool. And I don't know, it just stayed with me. I liked it. I like that movie, so I recommend it. Check it out if you guys think you might be interested in it. It was, again, I really enjoyed the writing, the way the movie was laid out in terms of like narrative choice. I really enjoyed that as well. And Eddie Murphy, of course, acted his ass off, and it was like in a serious role, and which was cool. And it was a movie came out a few months ago, last year, so it's pretty sick. That I hadn't even heard of it. Next is Boss Baby. Boss Baby, I actually went to the theater to go see. I went with my wife. She's into cartoon movies and stuff like that, and has actually gotten me into them. I spoke to you guys about a few in the past. I think Maona was probably the last one. And we enjoy going to the movies. It's like a thing for us. I could download movies, or allegedly, or buy them online or rent them or whatever, on demand on TV, and Netflix and all that shit. But we enjoy the experience of going to the movies. There's a theater that I go to in Fresh Meadows here in Queens. It's AMC, and it's one of those movie theaters which I highly recommend. If you guys didn't know about them, because I didn't know about them at one point, I recommend you going to one of these. And if you do, you probably won't go to a regular theater again. Because what I hate, I've always liked the experience of going to movie theaters, but what I hate about it is like, the crowdiness of it, the people fucking getting your seat kicked and all that shit. Having to rush, try to get good seats, and if you don't, you're fucked. But this movie theater is one of these recliner, like lazy boy recliner movie theaters. So each individual seat is literally like a big ass lazy boy recliner, and so it's a lot less people. Because of that, it's not these cramped little seats that they pack the room with. And you could literally lay all the way flat down and you still can't touch like the seat in front of you. So you don't have to worry about that type of shit. And the best part is that you pre-select your tickets when you purchase them, and you know exactly where you're going. You could go a second before the movie starts, and nobody's going to be in your seat or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about that type of shit. And it's the same price as $15, $16, $13 depending on the theater. Like it's within that same price range, which is sick. And we just enjoy like that process, and the popcorn and nachos and Slurpees and shit like that. Whatever, we like that shit. And we went to go see Boss Baby, which had a dope cast. Like I knew obviously Alec Baldwin was in it. He was the main baby, but I didn't know that Lisa Kudrow, which was Phoebe from Friends, was in it. My man from Boardwalk Empire was in it. What's his name? I can't think of his name right now. The guy with the buggy eyes. He was the fucking main protagonist in Boardwalk Empire. He was, Adam Sandler's boy. Steve Buscemi, he was in it. Jimmy Kimmel was in it. There was a bunch of people, and the movie was entertaining. It was cool. It was funny. The coolest part is that there was like a nod to Glengarry Glen Ross, which is a movie that probably I was speaking about this with my boy Pablo. Probably only people of like a certain age know about it, and that are, I guess, like into like those Wall Street finance type movies, but it's a classic within like that realm of people. It's like less, a little bit younger crowd would know of the movie like Boiler Room, and even some of the youngest, I guess now, probably like wouldn't even know about Boiler Room, let alone Glengarry Glen Ross. But in Boiler Room they reference Glengarry Glen Ross a lot. Anyway, and they try to redo that famous scene in Glengarry Glen Ross with Alec Baldwin, which is actually referenced in Boss Baby. They actually try to kind of sort of redo that scene in Boiler Room with Ben Affleck, like they do like their version of in that movie. And it's like rewriting like the same scene with the same sentiment of a scene, but obviously different words, different characters, different plot. Anyway, in Boss Baby, they reference the movie, which is a movie that kind of like made Alec Baldwin, if I'm not mistaken, or popularized them even more. And where he tells this group of salesmen, he's like busting their chops and telling them that they're not selling shit and they're not worth shit, and he has a Ferrari or he has a BMW, an $80,000 BMW and a Rolex watch and this, that, and the third, and they're driving Hyundais and you know, et cetera, et cetera. He's trying to like hype them up to like sell more by telling them that they're pieces of shit. And one of the guys gets up, he goes to get a cup of coffee, and he tells them, put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers. And he that's in Glenn Ross. So then in Boss Baby, there's like a similar little scene where the little babies are gathered around the living room coffee table, and you know, he's speaking to them. He has his like little team of babies, and one of them is a fat baby that's eating a bunch of cookies, and he like points at him and he's like, put that cookie down. Cookies for closers. So that was funny and pretty cool. And yeah, that's pretty much what I gotta say about that. It was an enjoyable experience. Recommend it, especially if you have kids and shit. Probably they would like it even more. But it was cool. It was a cool movie. I definitely wasn't mad that I saw it, you know. And that star-studded cast definitely helped enhance the experience. What I did see is a movie that it was an alright movie. I saw it at my roomie Raul's house over this past weekend. This past weekend or the weekend before? This past weekend. It's called Boyka Undisputed. And the movie was alright. It was like a fighting movie, like a MMA type, like an underground MMA type movie, which was cool. It was made in Russia, or at least I don't know if it was made in Russia. It was it took place in Russia. The setting was Russia, like underground Russian fucking Fedor Emelianenko type fighting. And the movie was alright. You know, it's kind of like a predictable plot and stuff like that. Wasn't like in and of itself, it wasn't a great movie. What stood out the most to me about the movie is the cinematography or the directing. I don't know which it is, but the way it was shot, the way not the whole movie, the way the fighting scenes were shot. I legit think that any and all MMA movies, definitely, and maybe even boxing sequences in some movies, should be shot in the same dynamic way that this one was. You know how like the Matrix, the way the Matrix was shot, it kind of then, you know, it kind of like changed the game in terms of how, you know, fight scenes and flying and jumping and shit like that. You know, you could tell if a movie was pre-Matrix or post-Matrix. Like, they played with shit that seemingly wasn't done before and like created a style that you still see to this day in like movies and TV shows. I think this movie Boyka, that style that they used, that I can't even describe, just watch the movie and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like a first person but zooms out and dynamic floating around type of like fight sequence shooting. I don't know what the fuck it's called, but it was dope. And I think that all fighting movies should be shot in that way. Check it out. I'll put a link actually in the episode notes of the preview for the movie. And if you want to just Google it or whatever, it's called the Boyka Undisputed, Boyka Undisputed. And I also put a link to the famous Glengarry Glen Ross speech in the episode notes as well that I just referenced. And speaking of fighting, I saw UFC Fight Night Johnson versus Reis live on Fox. It was a free fight. It was sick. The co-main event and the main event were dope. Which other one? The middleweight fight with Whitaker. That was dope as well. But Mighty Mouse Johnson, the flyweight champion of the world. That's flyweight is 125 pounds, by the way, for those of you that don't know. And he tied the all-time UFC record for title defenses, previously held by Anderson Silva, which is 11 or 12 title defenses straight. He is completely dominant in that weight class. He's beat like the top 10 next contenders, and some of them like twice, and I think even 3. He had 3 fights, if I'm not mistaken, with Joseph Benavidez, but definitely at least 2 with a bunch of them, and he just demolishes them, like outclasses them. The closest one was a very unexpected close one, which wasn't even like close. I think it was still a unanimous decision, like points wise and stuff like that, but it was like a scrappy fight where Demetrius Johnson got caught once or twice, and but just showed like his sick composure as a champion. And I did an episode in the past about that fight, and I can't remember the fucking dude that he fought. Let me look it up real quick. It was the last dude to win Tough, the Ultimate Fighter show. That remember I told you guys that they did it just for him. Tim Elliott, that was his last fight. It was a round 5 unanimous decision, and they did this like Tough show, the show that they do, the UFC show. It's like the reality show, and the winner gets a UFC contract. They did it with all the champions of all different leagues within the same weight division to try to get like the cream of the crop, best person, because he already wiped out the division within the UFC. So now they're trying to see if somebody else could give him some comp, and Tim Elliott actually did. It was a scrappy fucking fight, but obviously not significant in terms of the outcome. Anyway, this fight, he just did more of the same. Just a complete fucking technician. And wound up submitting Wilson Reis in round 3. And got a performance of the night bonus for it. So he just dominated. Standing up, he dominated. Didn't take him to the ground right away. And when he did have him on the ground, choked him out. And it was done. The rumors I've heard, and I'll tell you guys which I prefer, is well, not the rumors. They're saying like he's so dominant at 125 that it only makes sense for him to go up to 135 and challenge for that title. And that would be Cody Garbrandt, which just beat Dominic Cruz for the title when Dominic Cruz beat TJ Dillashaw in a very controversial razor edge fucking fight. And Dominic Cruz was the only person that actually defeated Demetrius Johnson way early on in their career, so they had fought before. So the UFC could easily like build up that rivalry. You know, it's very sellable. And even though Dominic Cruz just came off of losing the title to Cody, but since he won the title so controversially and then lost it to Cody, the person that he lost it to controversially, which is TJ Dillashaw, he's now going to fight Cody for the belt. And they're actually doing the Tough show this season, which is another one that I'm going to be into watching again, because they have like an ongoing rivalry. They used to be part of the same camp, and TJ Dillashaw left and pretty much broke away from that camp, and that fight camp, which is pretty much the gym that you train at or whatever, and like the crew that you roll with within the fight world, and your coaches and shit like that, training partners, which oftentimes are other UFC fighters, etc., etc. And they're gonna fight for the title. For the title. So Mighty Mouse, Demetrius Johnson, I would imagine would do one fight one more time. Anybody who wants it within 125, just to grasp. Right now he's tied with Anderson Silva for most title defenses in UFC history. Win that record, fight one more time at 125, win that record while TJ and Cody Nola fight. And then he gets the winner of that. That's one way they can go. I say I would rather see he definitely do the 125 fight again. And Demetrius Johnson is a very active fighter. He could do like three to four fights a year. Do the 125, so secure that record. Imagine he loses, then the rest of this wouldn't matter. But whatever, I still want to see these fights. Then fight Dominic Cruz at 135, and then whoever the champion is at that time between Cody Nola and TJ Dillashaw, which is going to be a sick fight in and of itself. But obviously that's coming from, as a greedy fan, I want to see like all the fights I want to see. And then then this whole other like rumor or whatever, but it doesn't seem as likely, would be Demetrius Johnson fighting Conor McGregor in the UFC, which would be a sick draw, obviously. But they are DJ is he weighs 125, and Conor McGregor is the 145-pound champion as well as the 155-pound champion. However, they both cut a lot of weight to get to their weight classes. DJ walks around a lot heavier, supposedly, and Conor McGregor has fought at 175 or 185 when he fought Nate Diaz. I think it was 175. And, he's big. And when he used to cut down to 145, he literally looked like those old school skeleton costumes you used to wear as a kid for Halloween. That it's like a fucking spandex suit with a white skeleton painted on it. That's how he looked. That's how skinny and emaciated he looked, making that cut to 145. And so that's the maximum lowest that he would probably even ever be able to go physically. And if DJ could bump up, do the 135 with Dominic Cruz, see what happens there, and then bump up to 145 and make that fight with McGregor, that would be a fucking another sick way to go. So that would be very interesting. But right now, they're really entertaining, actually, the idea of McGregor fighting Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. And, it was very, very far unlikely before, when it was first rumored. Everybody, blew that off, come on. A UFC guy, a boxing guy, what's Mayweather got to fucking gain from it? He's fucking worth, what, $500 million or whatever the fuck. And versus McGregor. But I don't know, the guy fucking talked his way to it. It's supposedly a lot closer to being a signed done deal than ever rumored before. But nothing's still signed, but you have had actual statements made by the UFC, by McGregor, and Floyd Mayweather has acknowledged it also. He said a number that he wanted. I believe it was a minimum of, I forgot what it was. I think he was just saying, he makes $100 million a fight or whatever the fuck it is that he makes. Why the hell? And McGregor was saying that, he would want it to be 50-50. And Mayweather's kind of the most you've ever made was fucking $10 million or something like that on a UFC fight. Why would I give you $50 million? And whatever. I don't know. Back and forth. Shit talking and stuff like that. But the UFC did chime in and say that they'll do 25 million and 25 million and then divide the door in a different percentage based way. Not the door, the pay-per-views, which is where they make the bulk of their money. And then Conor talks shit about the UFC and doesn't think he needs the UFC in it to even make this happen, due to something called the Ali Act, where, since it's boxing, it's not MMA, the UFC shouldn't be involved, but the UFC is, McGregor is on the contract with the UFC and they're his promoter. It's a promotion company. It's not just an MMA company. And whatever. Long story short, it would be the most sellingest pay-per-view in history of all time. So there's a lot of money to be made. So that means there's a lot of people interested in making it happen. If they can convince the two to make it happen, it would be fucking sick to see. So whatever, McGregor's probably entertaining, obviously that more heavily than a fight with DJ, but I'm pretty sure he would think he has the advantage against DJ, being the bigger man, and the sound of, let's say he loses to Mayweather, which is very likely because it would be a boxing match, not a MMA fight. Then the taking the sting off of that with fighting for a third belt in the UFC would be attractive. You know what I mean? Anyway, enough of all that shit. It was a dope card. The Rose Namajunas fight was sick too. She beat the Karate Hottie, which was sad. But I like both of them, so those girls go fucking scrap, And but I was kind of like rooting for the Karate Hottie a bit. And she got choked the fuck out. And what else? Whitaker in the middleweight put himself on the map. He did his thing. He was, I don't even know if he was ranked before that fight, but he has to be now. After the performance that he put up, and if he was ranked, had to be like towards the end of the list, towards the end of the like top 10 list or whatever, or top 15. And that's all speculation. But yeah, it was a dope card, and it was a free card on Fox. So shout out to the UFC. Now let's get to some free writing, boys and girls. As I stated earlier, you can go to spuntoday.com/free writing, and I'm going to be sharing 2 different posts from that section of my website with you guys. And if you're interested, go to spuntoday.com/free writing. And the first one that I'm going to be reading and reflecting on was posted on April 15th, 2017. It's titled, "The Easiest, Hardest Thing." And I wrote, "It's the easiest, hardest thing you'll ever do in your life," to paraphrase Joey Coco Diaz. Isn't that how you feel about whatever it is that you do? The juxtaposition of it being an exhausting uphill climb day in and day out, coupled with the hindsight of there being absolutely nothing to it. It's absolutely astonishing. Is it necessary for that to exist? That angst, that build up? Do we need to go to that place to make it to this one? Does your painting gain the impulse needed while in those moments to land itself on your canvas? Do your words use those moments of trepidation to connect with one another in a way that's worthy of your page? When the climb up that daunting hill seems steeper and longer than in days past, take a moment to realize how easy life would get to live if this was your main day-to-day task. And I wrote that on Monday, July 20th, 2015 at 11:15 p.m. And there I go again with that like rhyming shit that I like while I'm doing it, but I don't like when I'm reading it. I feel like you sound like a fucking, like a douchebag or something. Like, what do you think? You're a fucking French poet guy? And with this, I guess I'm speaking of, again, as like usual, shit that I'm into or think of frequently, like writing, like having a hobby, a craft. You could apply to whatever it is that you're into, which is like the angle I usually go for with my writing, actually. Like, try to write things, obviously related to personal leanings and thoughts, but that are broad enough to apply to different facets of my own life, as well as other people being able to do that with theirs. And I got the idea from if I remember correctly, from, as I said, Joey Coco Diaz, which says something to the effect of, while he was on the podcast, he said something to the effect of that comedy when he's, speaking about his craft, speaking about stand-up comedy. That's the easiest, hardest thing that anybody would ever do in their lives. And I got that. I got what he meant by it. Because it's like, it's so easy that it's hard. It's so hard to sit down at your keyboard and write. It's so hard to have a writing goal for the week, for the day, and actually hit it. I want to write X amount of words today. It's so hard to actually do it. Even if you use, or when you use, certain tips and tricks that we've picked up along the way, like literally set a goal to write one sentence today. Anybody.